Welcome to the deep dive. We are really glad you're here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Let me start by putting you in a very specific and probably very uncomfortable situation.
Oh boy.
Imagine you are standing in a bakery in a foreign country.
Okay.
You've been studying the language of this country for months. You have the apps on your phone.
You've done the flashcards?
Exactly. You know the vocabulary.
Sure.
But now is your turn to order.
Right.
The baker asks you a simple question. And suddenly, instead of just answering naturally, you are standing there completely frozen.
Your mind just goes blank.
Inside your head, there's no language. There is only the frantic, clicking, whirring sound of a dial-up modem from the 1990s.
That classic buffering sound.
You know the word for bread is in your brain somewhere.
Uh,
But your brain has just decided to run a massive system update right at that exact moment.
right when you need it most.
You're desperately searching for the vocabulary word, trying to remember some grammar rule about masculine or feminine nouns you read in a textbook 3 years ago.
Sweating a little bit.
Oh, yeah. And you're just hoping the line of people behind you does not notice that you are essentially buffering.
It's such a universally relatable frustration for anyone who has ever tried to learn a second language.
We all want to be fluent. We want to connect with people. But that mental delay, that buffering, it can make you feel completely stuck.
It's an incredibly common experience, and it is entirely rooted in how we process new information under pressure.
How so?
Well, when we are forced to operate outside of our native language, the cognitive load, which is the sheer amount of mental energy required to process information, it spikes dramatically.
It's just too much all at once.
Exactly. Your brain is trying to manage social anxiety, auditory processing, memory retrieval, and physical articulation all at the exact same time. It's a neurological traffic jam.
And that brings us to the source material we are going to explore today. We are doing a very special edition of our show today.
We are.
We are looking at a brilliant educational podcast called Snowcat Speaks English.
It's a really unique approach.
It is. The goal of Snowcat Speaks English is to make language learning completely accessible. So today, we are adopting that philosophy.
Keeping things simple and clear.
Right. We're going to keep the English clear, avoid overly complex academic jargon, and keep the pace relaxed and fun.
But we are still diving deep into the science.
Oh, absolutely. We're diving incredibly deep into the science of how your brain learns.
The source material features two main characters.
Yes. There's Nina, who is the teacher. She has this amazing way of breaking down complex learning barriers into simple steps.
Another Stephen?
Stephen is the adult learner. And Stephen is highly relatable because he asks the exact questions that every single language learner thinks about, but might be too embarrassed to ask.
What really stands out about this source material is the contrast.
Contrast between what?
Between the simplicity of the dialogue and the depth of the psychology underneath it.
Right, because on the surface, the script is designed for beginner learners. It focuses on straightforward vocabulary.
But the psychological barriers that Nina and Stephen discuss, and the solutions Nina offers, reveal very sophisticated truths about adult learning.
They touch on cognitive overload
The protective ego involved in learning something new,
and the fundamental mechanics of how we actually achieve fluency instead of just memorizing a dictionary.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for today's deep dive is to look closely at this exact process.
Wait, I'm supposed to say that.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to deconstruct the mechanics of how to train your brain to speak in English.
Specifically, how to completely bypass that frustrating mental translation phase.
The phase that makes us feel like buffering computers in the bakery.
Exactly. We are going to look at 3 specific practical tips Nina gives Stephen.
And we want to see how they apply to the way you learn anything, not just a language.
Because the strategies discussed here are not just tips and tricks for passing a vocabulary test.
No, they are about fundamentally rewiring your relationship with the language itself.
Moving it from an academic chore to a natural reflex.
So let's start with Stephen outlining his biggest problem.
The translation trap.
Right. He tells Nina his process for having a conversation in English, and it is a grueling 4-step ordeal.
It sounds exhausting just thinking about it.
Step 1, he hears the English sentence. Step 2, he translates that sentence into his native language inside his head.
Step 3, he formulates his answer in his native language.
And finally, step 4, he tries to translate that new answer back into English so he can actually speak it out loud.
And he tells Nina that this process feels terribly slow.
He says his brain feels like an old computer making buzzing robot noises. Buzz.
which is such a great visual.
But I have to ask you, isn't that four-step process just the necessary reality of learning?
You'd think so, right?
I mean, how else are you supposed to understand something if you do not translate it into the language you already know?
That is the logical assumption every adult learner makes. But it is a massive trap.
Why is it a trap?
From a neurological perspective, every single step in that four-part process is a separate, heavy mental task.
Hearing the sounds is a task.
Searching your memory bank for the native equivalent is a task. Formulating a response requires executive function.
And then translating it back requires cross-referencing grammar rules.
Your working memory, the part of your brain that holds information temporarily, has a very strict limit.
So by the time you get to step 4, you're maxed out.
The natural flow of the conversation is completely gone. You've exhausted your working memory before you've even opened your mouth.
You're using brute cognitive force instead of natural processing.
Which brings us to Nina's brilliant analogy.
Yes, she responds to his old computer frustration with a very visual analogy. She tells him that translating in your head is like building a long bridge between two islands.
And crossing that bridge takes way too long.
Right. She said every single time you want to communicate, you have to walk all the way across this long bridge.
And her solution?
We don't want to walk across a long bridge. We want to take a plane that goes direct to English.
The bridge analogy is incredibly accurate for explaining neural pathways.
How does that map out neurologically?
When we learn a new language as adults, we naturally want to build it entirely on the foundation of our native language.
Our native language is the solid ground, the first island.
And the new language is the mysterious second island.
So if you rely on translation, you are constantly walking back and forth between the islands.
You are tethering the new information entirely to the old information. You never actually allow your brain to stand on the new island independently.
Stephen hears this and says, a plane, direct to English. But then he asks the obvious question.
How?
Exactly. How? Because he admits that his brain naturally wants to use his first language. It's comfortable. It's automatic.
When Nina says no translating, Stephen actually says it sounds like magic.
He cannot comprehend how to look at a dog and not first think of the word for dog in his native tongue.
But Nina gives him a very firm reality check. She says it isn't magic, it's practice.
She tells him that they have to teach his brain that English is not just a subject in a book. English has to become a part of his life.
But again, let's push back on this.
Yeah, let's. How do you make a language a part of your life when you are living in a country that does not speak that language?
And you're maybe only studying it for an hour a day?
That distinction between a subject and a life tool is paramount, regardless of your geography.
A subject in a book is something you study intellectually. You memorize historical dates, mathematical formulas.
You take a test, close the book, and walk away.
Your brain files that information in a very specific, compartmentalized way.
But a language is not a set of facts. It is a tool for interacting with reality.
If you treat it like a rigid academic subject, you will always maintain a psychological distance from it.
So to build the plane, to fly directly to comprehension, you have to stop treating the language as a puzzle to be solved.
You have to start treating it as an alternative lens through which you experience your daily reality, even if you are entirely alone in your room.
I want you, the listener, to reflect on this for a moment. Think about your own learning experiences.
This doesn't just apply to spoken languages.
Think about learning a programming language or learning to read sheet music or even the mechanics of a new sport.
Are you treating those skills like a subject in a book?
Are you constantly building slow bridges back to what you already know instead of trusting yourself to fly direct?
Are you translating the sheet music into letters in your head before you play the note?
Instead of just letting your fingers react to the symbol on the page. It is a profound question to ask yourself when you feel stuck in the beginner phase of any new skill.
It's a difficult hurdle because relying on the bridge feels safe.
Taking the plane feels risky to the adult ego.
Because you are leaving the comfort and competence of your native understanding completely behind.
But as Nina points out, severing that tie is the only way to achieve true speed and fluency. You have to tolerate the discomfort of not translating.
Which leads us directly into segment 2 and Nina's very first practical tip for Stephen.
How do we build this airplane? How do we sever the tie?
Nina introduces tip number 1, the internal monologue.
At first, Stephen is confused by the vocabulary, but Nina explains it simply, keeping with our accessible English theme.
Internal means inside. Monologue means talking.
You are talking to yourself inside your head.
Now, every language learner has tried this. You walk around your house, you stick Post-it notes on everything.
Desk, chair,
Mm.
window. You look at the objects and you say the word.
But Nina tells Stephen that this classic labeling method is entirely wrong.
What's fascinating here is how Nina diagnoses the flaw in the Post-it note method.
She asks Stephen to look around the room and tell her what he sees.
Stephen replies, I see a microphone. I see a glass of water. I see you, Nina.
Nina points out that most students just label the objects. Microphone, water, Nina.
The problem with labeling is that it does not simulate actual language use. It simulates a flashcard.
Wait, let me challenge that.
Go ahead.
If I do not know the vocabulary, how else am I supposed to learn it, if not by looking at an object and labeling it? Why is labeling a cup of water bad?
It's not inherently bad, but it is severely limited.
Because when you just label an object water, you are not engaging the brain's syntax structures.
You're not creating context.
You are simply seeing the object, triggering the native word in your brain, remembering the English translation, and saying the isolated word.
It reinforces the bridge.
Nina insists that to truly train your brain, you need complete sentences, even if they are incredibly short.
Instead of looking at the water and thinking the word water, she tells him to think, I am thirsty, or the water is cold.
Stephen is surprised by this. He asks, even small ones.
And Nina says, yes, very small.
I see the difference. Water is just a noun. The water is cold is an experience.
Precisely. This is a critical distinction in language acquisition. Moving from isolated labels to context-driven sentences is what actually rewires the neural pathways.
When you create a sentence like, the water is cold, you are doing something entirely different than reading a flashcard.
You are connecting a physical sensory reality, the feeling of the cold glass in your hand, directly to the English grammatical structure.
You are linking your sensory input directly to the target language, completely bypassing the native language.
You do not need to translate the concept of cold if your brain is currently processing the physical temperature of the glass while generating the English sentence.
Stephen catches on to this immediately. He starts providing some deeply relatable examples of how to apply this.
He says, okay, so when I wake up in the morning, I do not just look at my bed and think the isolated word bed.
Nina encourages him, asking what he should think instead.
Stephen replies, I think the bed is warm, or I don't want to get up.
I don't want to get up. It has to be the most universal morning thought across all cultures.
And Nina's reaction to that is incredibly positive because he is doing exactly what the brain needs.
He is connecting the physical feeling of comfort and the emotional reluctance to leave the bed directly to the English words.
And she repeats her golden rule. No translation.
This internal monologue of small sensory-based sentences is the literal mechanism for building the plane.
It trains the brain to associate English words with real-world feelings, rather than associating English words with native words.
Stephen gets very excited by this concept. He starts mentally walking through his whole house during the conversation.
He says he goes to the bathroom, looks in the mirror, and thinks, I see my face. My hair is a mess.
Then he goes to the kitchen, looks at the fridge, and thinks the fridge is full.
He makes his morning drink and thinks, the coffee smells good.
He is narrating his entire morning routine using the absolute simplest vocabulary possible.
But if I'm a listener trying this tomorrow, won't I run out of things to say very quickly?
My vocabulary is limited. I can say the coffee is hot, but what if I want to say the coffee is a dark roast from Colombia that I bought yesterday?
That is exactly where the adult ego gets in the way, which we will explore more deeply later.
For this internal monologue exercise, you must resist the urge to be poetic or complex.
The goal is not to have a sophisticated debate with yourself.
The goal is momentum and normalization.
By reducing your thoughts to the coffee is hot, you are successfully maintaining the English frequency in your brain without triggering the dial-up modem buffering.
You are taking the language out of the textbook and bringing it into your most private, mundane moments.
When your brain gets used to describing your messy hair or your hot coffee in English every single morning, it stops treating English as a foreign, stressful entity.
It becomes a familiar background process.
Nina tells him to do this all day long, not just in the house.
When you are walking to the bus or waiting for a friend, describe what you see in tiny, simple sentences.
Stephen immediately practices this with examples like, the bus is late, the sun is hot, that dog is cute.
Imagine doing that. If you are listening to us right now, imagine walking down the street tomorrow and silently narrating your environment.
The traffic is loud. The sky is cloudy. The man is walking fast.
It seems so incredibly simple. Almost too simple. It feels like a child's game.
It feels simple, Because it removes the pressure of an external audience. You are not trying to impress anyone, you are just acknowledging reality.
By doing it silently inside your own head, as Stephen notes, when he worries people will think he is strange, there is zero social risk.
The fear of making a grammatical mistake in public is one of the biggest inhibitors of language learning.
This internal monologue provides a completely safe, private sandbox for your brain to practice generating syntax.
It is a brilliant way to trick your brain into practicing constantly without feeling like you're sitting at a desk studying.
Okay, so that is tip number 1. The internal monologue with small sensory sentences.
Then Stephen asks what else he can do. And this brings us to segment 3 and Nina's tip number 2.
She tells Stephen he needs input. She specifically calls it feeding his brain English food.
Now Stephen immediately asks, English food, fish and chips.
Which is a funny misunderstanding, but Nina clarifies she means listening and watching content.
But she gives him a massive warning. She says the secret to this input is that it must be easy.
This is where we encounter the single most stubborn psychological hurdle for adult learners.
The conflict between ambition and current capability.
I see this all the time. Stephen immediately pushes back against the idea of easy input.
He's a grown man. He says, but Nina, I want to watch Hollywood movies. I want to watch the news.
He wants to engage with the complex, mature media he enjoys in his native language.
And honestly, who can blame him? We learned a language to interact with culture.
If you tell an adult to go watch a cartoon about a talking dog, they are going to feel patronized.
Shouldn't we challenge ourselves with difficult material so we can learn faster?
That is the instinct, but neurologically it is counterproductive.
If you throw a beginner into a fast-paced, slang-filled Hollywood movie or a dense political news broadcast, you are overwhelming the system.
The brain simply cannot process the foreign audio signals fast enough to attach meaning to them.
The bridge we talked about earlier is suddenly flooded with too much traffic and it collapses.
So what does the brain do when the bridge collapses?
It protects itself from the stress by tuning out the foreign sounds entirely. It turns the English into white noise.
You stop actively listening and start passively surviving the experience.
Stephen actually admits this is true for him in the script. He tells Nina, when I watch fast movies, I feel sleepy.
I think every person who has tried to learn a language has experienced this.
You sit down, you put on a foreign film without subtitles, you are determined to learn. And 20 minutes later, you are fighting to keep your eyes open.
You feel physically exhausted.
It is not because the movie is boring. It is because your brain is burning massive amounts of glucose trying to process an impossible puzzle.
Nina uses a fantastic analogy to explain this concept to Stephen.
She tells him, your English brain is like a baby. A baby needs milk, not a steak.
That is such a vivid way to put it. You would never force a newborn to chew on a steak. It would be a disaster.
Stephen accepts this analogy with good humor. He laughs and says, okay, my English brain is a baby. It needs milk.
He agrees to look for simple songs, simple podcasts like Snowcat Speaks English, or the relaxed approach we are taking today, and simple children's stories.
But practically speaking, how does an adult accept this without getting incredibly bored?
It requires a temporary suspension of ego.
As adults, we are used to competence. We navigate our native languages with nuance, humor, and intelligence.
Becoming a beginner again, being reduced to the vocabulary of a toddler, is a very uncomfortable blow to the adult identity.
Attempting to consume steak-complex media when your language skills are only ready for milk is often driven by the desire to prove to ourselves that we are still intelligent adults.
By accepting the baby brain stage, you remove the friction of ego. You allow yourself to actually absorb the material instead of constantly fighting feelings of inadequacy.
But Nina knows that an adult cannot just watch toddler cartoons forever without losing motivation.
So she adds a very crucial caveat to this baby food rule.
She tells Stephen he has to connect this easy input to things he genuinely loves.
She asks Stephen what he is passionate about, and he says he loves football.
So, Nina suggests he find a YouTube video of a football match meant for kids, or a very simple football news channel in English.
Why does this subject matter make such a difference if the vocabulary is still simple?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the cognitive science behind this specific advice is incredibly sound.
It is about leveraging existing mental frameworks.
Why does the kids' football match work so well for Stephen?
Because Stephen already intimately understands the context, the rules, and the objective of the game of football.
He knows exactly what is happening on the screen without needing anyone to explain it to him.
He gives an example of what he might hear from the commentator. He kicks the ball, he scores.
He tells Nina, I understand that.
Precisely. Because he knows the visual action. He sees the player swing his leg, he sees the ball travel through the air, he sees it go into the net. His brain automatically bypasses the translation bridge entirely.
He does not need to translate the English word kick into his native language because he is watching a physical kick happen on screen at the exact millisecond he hears the word.
The visual context provides the meaning directly, linking the physical action straight to the English vocabulary.
When you combine highly accessible language with highly familiar, beloved subject matter, your comprehension skyrockets because the visual context is doing half the cognitive work for you.
You are basically using your deep knowledge of a hobby as scaffolding to prop up your weak knowledge of the new language.
So if you love baking, watch simple baking tutorials in English. You already know what flour and sugar look like.
When the baker says pour the sugar, and you see them pouring white powder, you learn the word pour without ever opening a dictionary.
It is a brilliant strategy to keep the adult brain engaged while feeding it the milk it needs.
It is the ultimate shortcut to bypassing translation. You are letting the real world translate for you.
Okay, let's review where we are. We have tip 1, the internal monologue. Think in small sensory sentences to yourself all day long to build momentum.
We have tip 2, English food. Listen to easy things you love to feed your baby English brain, using visual context to bypass translation.
Now we move to segment 4, which introduces the final and perhaps most intimidating piece of the puzzle.
Tip 3.
Nina tells Stephen that input, listening, and thinking is not enough. He has to focus on output.
She says he must open his mouth and speak out loud, even if he is completely alone.
Input, which is reading and listening, is a passive process. It builds your comprehension engine.
But output, which is speaking and writing, is an active process. It builds the physical and neurological pathways required for real-time communication.
You cannot become a fluent speaker solely through input, no matter how many hours you listen to podcasts.
Eventually, you have to coordinate the muscles in your jaw, tongue, and vocal cords to produce the foreign sounds.
Stephen, who is wonderfully enthusiastic throughout this whole script, proudly announces his current output strategy.
He says, I do this in the shower. I sing.
And honestly, singing in the shower is great. You are alone, the acoustics are good, you feel like a rock star.
Nina is supportive of this. She says singing is a good start.
But she pushes him a little further. She says singing is not conversational.
She suggests that at night, right before he goes to sleep, he should spend just 2 minutes talking out loud.
Stephen asks a very logical, very funny question. To who? My pillow.
And Nina's response, why not, introduces what might be the most practical, stress-free speaking exercise an adult learner can possibly do.
The pillow method. I love how Stephen realizes that his pillow is actually the perfect conversation partner.
Nina tells him to just recount his day.
Tell the pillow, today was a good day. I went to work, I ate a sandwich, I studied English with Nina and Stephen.
Stephen immediately sees the value in this setup. He notes, my pillow is a very good listener. It never interrupts me.
But let's look at this critically. If you are talking to a pillow, you are missing half of what makes a conversation difficult. The unpredictability of the other person.
Why is talking to an inanimate object so helpful?
Let us break down exactly why the pillow method is so effective for bridging the gap between silence and real conversation.
Stephen hits on the first reason. It does not interrupt.
Social anxiety is a massive, often paralyzing barrier to language output.
When you speak to a native speaker, your brain is doing double duty.
You are trying to form the English sentence, but you are also constantly monitoring the other person's facial expressions.
You are worrying if you are taking too long. You are fearing they will lose patience.
Or worse, that they will switch to your native language to save time, which feels like a failure.
The pillow removes all time pressure and all social anxiety.
You can take 30 seconds to form a sentence, and the pillow will wait patiently.
That makes total sense. You eliminate the social panic.
But Nina points out a second reason, which I think is far more controversial.
She says the pillow is great because the pillow does not correct your grammar.
She states her core philosophy very clearly here. She says the goal is fluency, not perfection.
The goal is just to keep the words flowing.
But wait a minute. If I'm sitting in my bed saying, I ate a sandwich, instead of I ate a sandwich, and no one corrects me, aren't I just permanently baking bad grammar into my brain?
That is the fear that paralyzes most learners, and it stems directly from traditional education models.
In school, we are heavily penalized for grammatical errors. A teacher with a red pen circles every mistake on our tests.
This trains us to prioritize accuracy over communication.
It trains us to hesitate, to overthink, to mentally verify every single verb, tense, and preposition before we dare to open our mouths.
But fluency, which is simply the ability to express a thought smoothly and continuously, requires overriding that fear of the red pen.
So you're saying that in the early stages, flow is more important than being factually correct.
Exactly. When you are building the physical habit of speaking, constantly stopping to self-correct destroys your momentum.
By speaking to an inanimate object that cannot judge or correct you, you practice the physical act of flowing from one word to the next without stopping.
You are training the physical muscles of your mouth to form English shapes, and you are training your brain to trust its own output.
Once the flow is established, you can refine the grammar through more input and active study.
But if you never establish the flow because you are terrified of making a mistake, you will never speak.
You are building the habit of momentum. You have to get the car moving before you can worry about steering it perfectly.
Nina tells him that the more he hears his own voice speaking English out loud, the more natural it will feel.
When you first start speaking a new language, it literally feels like an alien sound coming out of your own throat. It feels fake.
The pillow method normalizes your own English voice.
Stephen practices his nighttime routine right there on the script. He lowers his voice, gets into a calm state, and says, "I'm tired now. I want to sleep. Good night, pillow."
It is incredibly simple, but it completely demystifies the terrifying idea of speaking practice.
It creates a closed loop of positive feedback.
You form the thought without translation, you physically articulate it using your vocal cords, and your own ears hear you succeeding at communicating a reality, even if that reality is simply that you are tired.
It reinforces the concept from the very beginning of our discussion, making the language a part of your daily life, not just a subject in a book.
So we have these 3 fantastic actionable tips.
Internal monologue for momentum.
Easy input with visual context to bypass translation.
And the pillow method for stress-free output.
But as we move into segment 5, we look at the conclusion of Nina and Stephen's conversation.
And we find the master plan for how to actually implement this without giving up after 3 days.
Stephen is feeling confident, but he asks a very vulnerable, very human question.
He says, "Nina, these tips are great, but will I speak perfectly tomorrow?"
It is the eternal hope for a quick fix. We live in a culture of instant gratification.
We want the movie montage sequence where we study really hard for one night, the calendar pages flip rapidly, and we wake up completely fluent.
We want the Matrix download. We want to plug in and say, I know Kung Fu, or in this case, I know English.
But Nina is a responsible teacher. She gives it to him straight. "No, Stephen." And that's okay. Training your brain takes time.
Stephen immediately swings to the other extreme, which is also very common. He worries about the commitment.
He asks if he needs to study for 5 hours a day to see results.
Nina's reaction is immediate and forceful. She says, no, that's too much.
She prescribes something much more manageable, just 10 to 15 minutes every single day.
But let's be real. Is 15 minutes a day actually enough to learn a whole language?
It sounds like a marketing gimmick. Learn English in just 15 minutes a day. How can that compete with sitting in a classroom for hours?
It sounds like a gimmick, but it is deeply rooted in the neuroscience of habit formation and memory consolidation.
Nina is advocating for consistency over intensity.
When you sit down and try to cram vocabulary for 5 hours on a Sunday, your brain simply cannot retain that volume of novel information.
The synapses get exhausted.
Furthermore, memory consolidation, the process where short-term memories are converted into long-term memories, happens primarily during sleep.
So studying for 5 hours and then sleeping once is less effective than studying for 15 minutes and sleeping 7 times over a week.
Precisely. Engaging with the language for 15 minutes every single day signals to your brain that this information is constantly relevant to your daily survival.
It forces the brain to prioritize those neural pathways.
The daily repetition builds a sustainable habit, whereas the 5-hour marathon builds exhaustion and resentment.
The 15-minute rule absolutely prevents the burnout that derails almost all self-directed adult learners.
15 minutes is undeniably doable. You can do that while drinking your morning coffee or commuting.
Stephen agrees immediately, saying, 15 minutes, I can do that.
But Nina gives him one final piece of advice to protect his mindset during those 15 minutes.
She tells him to be highly patient with himself.
She says, if you make a mistake, if you forget a word, do not say, I'm bad at English.
Instead, she wants him to adopt a new catchphrase. She tells him to say, oops, try again.
This raises an important question about how much of adult learning failure is not a failure of intelligence, but simply a matter of harsh self-judgment.
When an adult makes a mistake, the internal narrative is often devastatingly critical.
The inner voice says, I'm bad at this. I'm too old to learn. I will never get it. I sound stupid.
This negative self-talk spikes cortisol and anxiety.
And as we know, a brain flooded with anxiety essentially shuts down its ability to absorb new information. It shifts into survival mode.
The cognitive friction returns.
Yeah.
You are back to the dial-up modem buffering, not because the language is too hard, but because you are panicking about being imperfect.
Exactly. But consider how a young child learns to walk, or how they learn their first language.
When a toddler stumbles and falls, or mispronounces a word, they do not have an existential crisis about their inherent abilities.
They do not decide they are just not a walking person. They just reset, maybe laugh, and try again.
Nina's phrase, oops, try again, is deliberately lighthearted. It mimics that resilient, low-stakes learning state of a child.
It reframes failure. It changes a mistake from a permanent character flaw into a temporary, easily fixable mechanical error.
Stephen really resonates with this shift in perspective. He repeats the phrase out loud, oops, try again.
And he tells Nina, I like that. My brain feels stronger already.
You can literally hear the relief in his approach. He isn't carrying the heavy, exhausting burden of having to be a perfect adult anymore.
He is just practicing. He is just playing with the language.
And that playful, forgiving mindset is the foundational soil that allows the 3 practical tips to actually take root.
You cannot maintain a constant internal monologue describing your messy hair, and you certainly cannot talk to your pillow about your sandwich if you are constantly berating yourself for using the wrong article or mispronouncing a vowel.
Radical self-forgiveness is a mandatory requirement for fluency.
So, what does this all mean?
As we bring this special Snowcat Speaks English style deep dive to a close, let's look at the big picture Nina and Stephen have painted for us.
If you want to bypass the dial-up modem, if you want to stop building the slow, exhausting bridge of translation and instead catch a direct flight to speaking a new language naturally, you need a new daily operating system.
You cannot just buy a textbook and hope for the best. It boils down to 3 core habits and 1 mindset shift.
First, you must cultivate an internal monologue made of small, simple sensory sentences that connect directly to your physical reality.
Don't just label the world with flashcard nouns. Narrate your physical experience of it. Build the syntax in a safe, silent space.
Second, you must feed your baby brain the right kind of English food.
You have to lower your adult ego, embrace easy, comprehensible input like simple stories or podcasts, and connect that input to subjects you already deeply understand and love.
Let your existing knowledge and the visual context do the heavy lifting, allowing your brain to completely bypass the translation process.
Third, you have to prioritize output without judgment. Talk to your pillow.
Describe your day out loud to an empty room before you go to sleep.
Let go of the need for perfect grammar and focus entirely on the physical flow of the words coming out of your mouth.
And finally, you have to wrap all of this in a safety blanket of consistency. Just 15 minutes a day and radical self-forgiveness.
When you stumble, and you will stumble, remember the phrase, oops, try again.
It is a highly cohesive, neurologically sound methodology for language acquisition, cleverly disguised as a simple conversation between a teacher and a student.
It really is. Now, at the end of their script, Nina and Stephen leave their audience with a small homework assignment.
And we want to pass that exact same call to action onto you.
Right now, wherever you are listening to this deep dive, whether you are walking to work, sitting on a train, or washing the dishes in your kitchen, look around you.
Form one simple English sentence about what you see right now.
Stephen gave the example. I see a blue pen. What do you see? Form that sentence in your head right now.
No translating, just connect the physical object and the feeling to the English words.
It is the perfect, low-stakes first step to building that permanent internal monologue.
Take that step today.
But before we sign off, I want to toss things over to my co-host here for one final thought.
We have spent this hour talking deeply about the mechanics of language learning, cognitive load, and habit formation.
But I know you always see the broader philosophical layers in these psychological concepts. What is the final idea you want to leave our listener with today?
I have been thinking a lot about Nina's specific instruction to reduce our thoughts to the absolute simplest sentences.
I am tired. The sun is hot. The coffee smells good.
We've discussed this purely as a linguistic exercise to build momentum, but it also strikes me as something much deeper regarding human psychology.
When we operate in our native adult language, Our internal monologue is rarely that simple. It is usually a chaotic storm.
We use our vast native vocabulary to construct anxieties about the future, to replay regrets about the past, to manage complex social calculations, and to dwell on abstract worries.
Our native language is a beautiful tool, but it also allows us to constantly overcomplicate our own existence.
When we force ourselves into the baby brain state of a new language learner, and we restrict our internal monologue to A1 level English, we literally do not possess the vocabulary to worry about our 5-year career plan or our complex interpersonal dramas.
We only have the words to acknowledge our immediate physical reality.
We only have the words to say the water is cold, the sky is blue, or the bed is warm.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. By engaging in this kind of simple, highly observant language practice, do we actually become more present in our daily lives?
Does learning a new language with a baby brain secretly offer us a profound, meditative break from the overwhelming, exhausting complexity of our adult native tongue?
Perhaps training our brain to speak a new language is not just about communication.
Perhaps it is also simultaneously training our brain to simply be here, right now, in the present moment.
That is an incredible perspective. Learning a language is a form of forced, daily mindfulness, stripping away the anxiety by literally removing the words for it.
That is a beautiful thought to end on.
Thank you so much for exploring this cognitive science with me today. And thank you all for listening to this special deep dive.
Keep practicing, keep your sentences simple, enjoy the easy English food, and always remember to be kind to your baby brain.
We will catch you on the next one.